In my last video, I mentioned that I'll be moving to New York City, and shocker, I'm in New York City. And I wanted to make this video because I found that there was a lot of information out there about how to find an apartment, but all the information that I found personally relevant, I wanted to squeeze into one video and just make it as detailed as possible. So is this a podcast? Is this a presentation? I don't know. I even have notes here, so you know she came prepared. And I don't want to waste anyone's time, so we're just going to get right into the background now. Starting with a little bit of background about myself, I grew up in the suburbs of San Diego, and I went to college in Philadelphia. So when COVID hit in 2020, I went back home to San Diego, and I was there for 2 years before moving to New York City January of this year. In terms of why I wanted to move to New York City, the number one reason was my job change. I was assigned to the New York location, but I actually chose to be in New York because most of my friends from college are now in New York, mostly for finance and consulting jobs. And I wanted to be close to them after being isolated during COVID. And I was reading this one book recently, The Dionysian Dithyrambs by Nietzsche. And he writes that isolation can actually corrupt humans, and that being in crowded places can actually help you rediscover and renew yourself. And so I was a little bit inspired back then and again now to be in a more crowded area where I'm pushed outside of my comfort zone of being in the suburbs, and wanted to get some character development in. So those were the main reasons why I wanted to move to New York. That's enough about me. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the different New York City neighborhoods. All right, so it's a bit of a geography time, but this is a map of Manhattan that I found on Google. And to the left here, we have New Jersey, so like the Hoboken area. And to the right is Queens, and right here is Long Island City. And down here in this little section right here is Brooklyn. Well, Brooklyn is like this big, but this is Brooklyn. This is probably Dumbo. Anyways, based on this map here, I would say that everything above the south side of Central Park would be considered Upper Manhattan. And then everything from that south side down to Union Square would be considered around Midtown. And then everything below that is Lower Manhattan. Some of the more famous neighborhoods are the Financial District down here in Lavender, and this is where the World Trade Center and Wall Street are. So there are a lot of tall buildings down here. Soho, right here in this grapefruit color, is where the shopping district is. Moving on, and then here is East Village and the Lower East Side, which is where a lot of clubs and bars are. So a lot of young people either live there or go out to this area. So that's about it for the different neighborhoods in Manhattan. Now on to finding actual rental listings. If you're planning on renting an apartment, your best bet is to use one of these resources. So I would say StreetEasy is one of the most commonly used sites to find listings. And I found this the most useful because you can use filters to basically select different amenities and locations that you want. So you're only looking at the listings that you'd be interested in. And then other sites that you can potentially use that I personally didn't use are Zillow Rentals, Facebook Marketplace, but I would just be very careful about scams, and apartments.com. I haven't used it personally, but it is worth a shot. And then Bond Real Estate. This usually has a broker fee, but you can find listings here that don't have a broker fee. And another option is to use brokers to find listings, but I would just be aware that broker fees can usually be up to 10 to 15% of your annual rent, or it can be 100% of your first month's rent. So depending on what price range you're looking at, it can be quite a lot. So just something to think about. In a perfect world, you'd see a listing that you like on StreetEasy, you would reach out to the broker and they'd get back to you quickly, and you set up an appointment, go see the apartment, you love it. There's no one else that wants the apartment. Great, you send in your documents, everything is good to go, and hurrah. But unfortunately, the New York City rental market is really competitive and the turnaround time here is really quick. So for the place that I'm in right now, my roommate and I actually saw the listing pop up in the morning, and then we saw the listing in the afternoon, and we put the deposit in right after we saw it because we were the first ones to see the apartment. And I think that's how we secured this place, because we were the first ones to see it. So my 2 tips for actually getting the listing that you want is show up early to the showing if you can, because sometimes if you show up early and the other group that's supposed to be there didn't show up, then you might actually get bumped up. So you just want to up your chances of getting the listing. And the second one is have your documents ready. And by documents, I mean like everything that you would need to submit to get a lease. And I'll link the Street Easy blog article that I used to reference what documents I prepared for the rental market. And that was really helpful. And another tip is if you have a roommate that you're signing with, combine all of your documents into one PDF because it'll just make your life a lot easier when you're sending it to the broker. And I think they will appreciate that. Now on to the fun part. Everyone has different wants and needs when they're looking at a listing, but here are some common questions that you might want to ask yourself as you're looking through these listings. Can you read that? I'll zoom in. Do you and your roommate's combined salary exceed 40 times the rent? And some listings actually require 45 times, so you want to make sure that your combined salary exceeds 40 times the annual rent. Another thing, does the apartment allow flex walls? A flex wall is basically a temporary wall that you can build to convert an open space into a bedroom. So some apartments allow this, some apartments don't. So that's something to look out for if you're going to have a roommate. And then how many bedrooms are there? And the bedrooms are in capital letters because a bedroom basically means that it has a door and windows, or a singular window. And some rooms actually don't have doors in New York, and maybe the door is like transparent. And some rooms don't have windows, in which case I would consider that a prison cell and not a bedroom. So you really want to make sure that the bedrooms that you're looking at have windows. Where is the bathroom located? Is it near the kitchen? Are you comfortable with that? Are all of the outlets functioning? It's kind of hard to test this when you're at the listing, but I would just make sure to ask the broker to see if all the outlets are functioning. And next we have, how is the water pressure? So don't be afraid to flush the toilet and turn on the faucets in the apartments to test the water pressure, because the last thing you want is to find out that your toilet doesn't flush very well after you move in. And then which direction do the windows face? Because this is really important for sunlight. And then what is included in the rent? And some listings actually don't include any of the items that I've mentioned here. And even if the rent price itself is quite cheap, if none of these are included, then your rent will actually be higher. So that's something to consider. How many units are there in the building? So are you sharing one elevator with 20 units, or are you sharing 3 elevators with 300 units? That can make a big difference during rush hour, so that's something to make note of. Laundry in unit is a bit more rare in Manhattan, especially in older buildings, and a lot of them will just have laundry in the building. And the laundry is usually like a payment method, where the one here, we use a card that we recharge, but some of them are actually coin laundry. So that's something to be aware of if you're used to suburban life where you just have a washer and dryer included in the apartments. And street noise level is quite intuitive. If you're facing an avenue, it'll likely be louder than if you're facing a street. And then lastly, most of these are intuitive. Does the building allow pets? Does the building have a doorman? This is just for safety measures, and personally I wanted to find a building that had a doorman. It would just make me feel a lot safer. And then, have there been rodent or insect problems in the past? You can just ask the seller agent about this, and sometimes they'll be quite upfront and honest about it, or it will be listed in the lease. What is the closest subway station to the apartment? And if you're living in Midtown and like the middle of Manhattan, then you might have a lot more subway stations that you can access. So my closest subway station is a 4-minute walk, versus if you're living closer to the river on the east or west side of Manhattan, then chances are your closest subway station might actually be more like a 10-minute walk. So during the winter especially, that's something to keep in mind. And finally, how long is my commute if applicable? And is there a discount for signing a 2-year lease versus a 1-year lease? And to wrap it up, my best advice when you're at a showing is try to strike up a conversation with some of the current residents and ask them how their experience has been living in the building. Because if they mention anything positive or negative, make note of these items as you decide which listing you want to move forward with. And now, congratulations, the broker has decided to move forward with your application, and all you need to do is sign the lease. And once you decide on a listing and receive the lease document, make sure to read the whole lease. And I'm definitely guilty of never reading the full terms and conditions before clicking I accept the terms and conditions. But when it comes to a lease, definitely read the whole thing, because my roommate and I actually found a few errors in our lease document and we had to wait until we got a new version of it to sign the lease. So this is very important. Just make sure to read the whole thing and scan for any errors. And then my only tip for this topic is, until you actually sign the lease and send it to the broker and they send you a confirmation, you should continue to look at other listings just in case this one falls through. And it does happen sometimes in the New York City rental market. So you do want to be keeping your eye out for some backup options if this one falls through, especially if you're coming close to your move-in date. We're almost at the end of our journey here. You signed the lease, you received your keys, and you moved into the apartment. Now what? We need to furnish the apartment. So some of the most commonly used furnishing sites that my roommate and I used were Amazon, obviously, Overstock, Wayfair, Etsy, Facebook Marketplace, and just plain old Stooping. And Facebook Marketplace proved to be the most useful for finding some secondhand items because we didn't want to spend a ton of money furnishing our place. And then Stooping, which I didn't know was a thing before moving to the city, is basically when someone has a furniture item they don't want and they just place it on the side of the street, and then maybe you're walking by and you like it, so you take it home. So that's what Stooping is. And this stand right here that you're looking at, I actually found on, where did I find it? Upper East Side, while I was just looking through listings. And I found this and took it with me on the subway and brought it home. And now it holds our plants normally. Right now, the monitor, but normally plants. If you're trying to furnish on a budget, IKEA works well, and Stooping NYC, the Instagram page, actually has a bunch of these like Stooping furniture posts. So you can refer to that. And then, of course, Facebook Marketplace for like discount price items. All right, we reached the end of our journey. We found the listing, we went to the showing, we signed the lease, we furnished the apartment. Hooray. So for my next two videos, I'm going to talk about transportation in New York City, as well as how to actually save money in New York City, because like everyone else, I'm trying to save money and live better. So I hope those two videos are also quite helpful for anybody that's looking to move to the city, because things can be a little expensive out here. I really hope this topic of housing in New York City was helpful. Please let me know how I did by clicking on the like button or subscribing if you wish to. And also, I welcome any feedback, positive or negative, in the comments below. So just let me know how I did, if it was helpful. And that's all I have for today. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!